Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind2Mind. I'm Tiffani Neilson, and with me is my co host, Dr. Joseph Perez. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
Hey, Tiffany, I'm doing all right, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. And today's
Absolutely.
topic is right mind. And before we get started on that topic, Dr. Joe, are there any updates you'd like to share with us? You're always up to so much.
Oh, you're absolutely right with that, Tiffany. So, I'm happy to be home after a few days in Germany last week, where I gave the closing keynote at Developer Week in Nuremberg. My wife was able to go with me, and we had a blast in Nuremberg. My only regret is that it was so short. But anyway, the next couple of things on the horizon are the a trip to Orlando to give the closing keynote at ProcureCom East in mid-September, followed by a very long flight to the NDC Sydney conference in Australia. That's in October. A week or so after I get back from Australia, I fly out to Phoenix to speak at the HCCA compliance past spring and early summer. I tell you what, I'm really happy to take a break in August, stay in the States in September before I start globe trotting again in October. So, you know, it's crazy. But what's going on with you, Tiffany?
You must be really racking up those frequent flyer miles, Dr. Joe.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, I am.
Well, what's new with me? Well, we are gearing up for our Summit of Things event, which is an all-day summit. So it's about, 10 times the work as a regular webinar, which is already quite the undertaking. Plus, we've got our
Yeah.
award show that we're gearing up for and have been asked to contribute to several publications. So there was a metaverse article that just came out that's exciting. And I'm also moderating a panel during Mobile World Congress. So that's exciting. So lots of things going on here as well. Not quite as, traveling as much as you, but still staying very, very busy.
That's cool. That's neat.
And back to today's topic. So, right mind. When I think of right mind, obviously we're talking about state of mind. This is not a right or left
Mhm.
political conversation, it's state of mind. But what
Right.
is a right mind? And so, looking at the topic and thinking about what a right mind could be, when you combine the types of focus, which are internal and external, with the ways that we focus, which could be helpful or harmful, you get four distinct states of mind, which are autopilot, critical, thinking, and engaged. And there's also the wise mind living. Apparently, everyone has the capacity for wise mind living because we all have wisdom within us. However, to fully understand this concept, it will help to understand logic mind, emotion mind, and wise mind. And these three states of mind were coined by Dr. Marcia Linehan, and she's the founder of dialectical behavior therapy. Have you heard of these, Dr. Joe? I'm sure that you have.
Yes, I have, Tiffany. The wise mind, logic mind, emotion mind, they're not always called the same thing. Sometimes they're known by different names. For instance, sometimes a logic mind is sometimes called the reasonable mind. Some might refer to the emotion mind as the emotional mind. It's the same thing, okay? Something like that. But whatever you call them, they're just simply various states of mind that can be leveraged together to manage one's behavior. Essentially, the reasonable mind is driven by logic, hence the other name, logic mind, as you said. The emotional mind is driven by feelings, and excuse me, the wise mind. Well, that one's like a middle ground between the two. And that's where we seek to achieve some sort of balance between logic on the one hand and emotion in the other. Now, when the emotion side seems to have a little more influence or emphasis, people will tend to allow their, excuse me, to allow their emotions to control their behaviors. All right. In a given situation, for example, they might act on impulse without much concern for the consequences. All right. But by contrast, when we approach a situation rationally or intellectually, well, that's when we're using the reasonable or the logical mind, the logic mind. And when we do that, we're going to typically plan and make decisions based on fact rather than feeling, right? We tend to look at things with a pragmatic lens when we use that mind, right? So, where the wise mind comes into play is when people are typically able to recognize and respect their feelings on the one hand, while at the same time managing to respond to those feelings in a rational manner in the other. Now, I believe that the measure of wisdom, as it were, is the extent to which these two extremes can be balanced, leveraged, focused, and even brought into harmony. And that's probably why it's called the wise mind, because that is indeed true wisdom.
And emotional intelligence all wrapped up into one. That's great, Dr.
Absolutely. You
Joe.
got that right. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And when I think of right mind, I think of being in a happy, healthy mental state. And it definitely involves balance to get there, for sure. But what
Yes,
are
it
some
does.
other characteristics that you think of when you hear the phrase right mind, Dr. Joe?
Hmm. Great question. Right mind. Okay. So, well, uh, in the classical generic sense, as it were, um, if you're thinking of the idiom "right mind," as most people do, I take it to mean personally when you are thinking in a rational manner, okay, in a manner that's sensible, that's sound, as opposed to being irrational or crazy, right? Like what you said about being in that happy and healthy mental state. I like that. I would agree 100% with that, Tiffany. This is what the idiom "right mind" means to me. Okay, the rhetorical question, "Are you out of your mind?" That some people will ask, right? That comes to mind, if you will, no pun intended, when the person asking it assumes that the person to whom they're speaking to not be quite sane. All right. The elevator doesn't go all the way up to the top, right? There are a few bricks shy of a full load, or they're off their rocker. They're not playing with a full deck. They're one sandwich short of a picnic. My favorite one for Star Trek. They're not firing on all thrusters. Yeah, yeah. But seriously, um, being in one's right mind to me, right, means that one's mental state is on an even keel. Probably much more than just the lack of insanity or living proof that they do indeed have all their marbles in their head. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that. It also involves being aware of who you are and where you stand, of of being comfortable in your own skin. That's what I think it means anyway. How about you?
I think it also has to do with being calm and being present,
Yeah.
because if you're present and you're aware of your surroundings and you're observant, I mean, that kind of, and we're going to get into the left mind, right mind conversation
Mhm.
here shortly, but it all kind of feeds together. So before I get ahead of
Yes.
myself, let me stick on the track that we have going now.
Okay.
And so let me tell you first why I chose this topic, Dr. Joe, because I have a friend
Mhm.
named Kalima, and I was going through a rough time, and she had this game she'd created. And it was kind of an experience that you spun this Dharma wheel, and that it would direct you to focus your energy on either, right mind, right speech, right action, right intention, all these different right types of thought and action and everything else. But it really
Right.
was eye opening, because to think, oh well, there's right and wrong action, there's right and wrong intention, there's right and wrong mental states, there's and it's true all over the board. But I think right now people really need to be reminded of what's right and what's wrong, because it's so blurred right now. There's such
Mhm.
a sharp contrast between what I had thought was right and wrong as a child versus how things are playing out now that I'm an adult, and things are, definitely changing societally
Right.
and, geopolitically and in every other sense. And as scarcity and everything else comes before us, we're really going to be challenged, and we really need to have our moral compass set clearly. And so I
Yes.
thought it would be a good conversation starter, and I mean, obviously you agreed, and that's why we're here today. But what are your thoughts on all that,
Sure.
Doctor?
Sure. So glad you mentioned that. Different people use whatever tool, whatever guide that they see fit to employ as as a sort of as a guiding framework under which to operate or structure in which that they're going to act and move and decide what's right and wrong. All right. You know, we could all use a little bit of help in setting expectations, boundaries for the way that we conduct ourselves, goals that we put before us that constantly encourage us to do better today than we did yesterday, and even better than that when we get to tomorrow. I mean, I know I do a better job when I have some motivation that's pushing me along to do right, some goal to meet, a standard to follow, a framework to keep it all together. Now, since you asked me what I think about this, Tiffany, well, I've got to be honest with you and tell you that as a Christian, my standard, my framework, my version of the Dharma wheel, if you will, is the Bible for me. Okay. Now I don't always hit that mark. I often fall short. Quite often I fall short of that. But somehow by the grace of God, I'm certainly not ever going to stop trying. And that incredibly high standard before me is not meant to discourage me. On the contrary, it's my highest motivation to press on and be in my right mind, as it were, and do the things that are right. It pushes me to to focus on the right things. Okay, to think on the right things. Where my focus is, that's where my actions are going to be centered. As the Apostle Paul said to the Philippians, he said, "Whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." Okay, focus on the positive instead of the negative. Okay, I honestly believe that if my focus is right, and it goes on to right things. If my mind is right, then my actions will follow. Regardless of what measuring stick you personally would use to judge what this rightness or wrongness means. At least if you have that standard, you stick to it and you focus on the things that are right and the things that are going to lead you in that direction, then the actions will follow where your focus already is.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. And I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think that your beliefs and your faith is so important in helping
Mhm.
you make it through and make the right decisions when
Right.
approaching a decision that's either right or wrong. And I'm definitely respectful of all religions. I know it's an international broadcast, so I try to respect everyone's beliefs and
Right.
boundaries, because what's right for one person might be wrong for another. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are vegan and feel that eating meat is wrong. And so there's definitely all different types of beliefs out there. Personally, I feel that
Sure.
the first indicator is your gut. If you feel it in your gut and it just feels wrong, don't do it. Just save yourself the
Mhm.
hassle and don't do it. But if something feels right, if and it's not to if it feels good, do it, because that's definitely not always a good idea.
Right.
But
Yeah.
to have a decent sense of, with using your instincts, to be able to tell right from wrong. But how
Mhm.
do you go about telling right from wrong, Dr. Joe?
So that's an excellent segue. It's something that I believe that we're innately endowed with, by our Creator. It stems from having that moral compass that you were talking about earlier, right? What does that look like? Well, for different people, it'll look different ways, right? Our audience already knows from your previous shows, and I've already said, I'm a Christian. Okay, I make no bones about that. Of course, I'm not going to ram it down anybody's throat, nor be obnoxious about it. And I'll be respectful of other people's faiths, of course. I am that way. But at the same time, I'm not going to be ashamed of my faith either. All right. Now, with that said, I believe that God has given mankind the inner capacity to tell right from wrong. Right? You can call it a conscience, if you will. You can call it your gut, whatever you want to call it. But that conscience needs to be educated, refined, and honed before it can be truly effective. And for me, once again, that education, that honing, that refinement comes from the Bible. All right. I don't want to offend anybody, of course, but the question was, how do I judge right from wrong? And to me, the Word of God is my source to do so. Personal individuals, they have their own beliefs that they use to make that judgment call, and that's fine. Those who don't believe the Bible, well, everybody pretty much is going to agree, Bible or no Bible, are going to agree upon certain non-negotiables, certain things that murder is wrong, right? Loving your fellow man is right. Okay, cheating is wrong, and being honest with yourself and others is right. Cruelty to others, cruelty to animals, cruelty to the young, cruelty to the weak, whatever. Okay, all that's wrong. But caring for people, caring for the needy, that's right. A whole host of other things that I could list contrasting pairs like that all day long. Here's the point. All that is in the Bible. And of course, it'll be in other religious books as well, and even non-religious books, whatever. You might believe in some different holy book to which you hold in your own faith. Hey, that's completely up to you. Follow what you believe yourself. The idea is, just like when we talked about frameworks and structure and guidelines and one of the previous questions, I think that plays into this one as well, is having that solid foundation, having that solid standard to which you hold yourself, to which you believe, and upon which you stand without wavering or compromising. Take a stand for what you believe in, and follow it to the extent that you can, and use that to decide if you're going to go on one path or the other, ensuring you're not going to hurt somebody, you're not going to infringe upon them, you're not going to be cruel or treat somebody else unkindly, or do something that would harm them or that would harm yourself. Not just because it feels good. It may feel good to eat a pound of chocolate, but you're going to harm yourself and get zits or get fat or whatever. If you overeat on overindulge on certain things, whatever the case. But have that belief system, whatever it is, stick to it, and stand by it, live by it, and move forward. At least that's how I see it.
I think that's great, Dr. Joe. And it really just makes me think back to the 10 commandments. I mean, they were written in stone and just that plain as day, the 10 commandments,
That's
they're
right.
there, and then
Yeah.
some of those things, just like don't steal from others. There are certain things that are
Right.
just considered like a golden rule that it should just be understood, but
Yeah.
maybe there's blurred lines that need to be, addressed at this crazy point in history. But another thing that I wanted to
Exactly.
bring up is, and you touched on it earlier, is the concept of being out of your mind. What exactly does being out of your mind even mean? I mean, like, you have to be out of your mind if you were bleeding, you jumped in the ocean, there's a bunch of sharks. Yeah, the person's probably out of their mind. And
Uh,
it almost goes like if you drove your car off a bridge intentionally, you'd probably be out of your mind. And, what is out of your mind? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Joe?
Most definitely, Tiffany. Those things are crazy. People do the strangest things. All right. I don't know. Duct taping themselves to a door, seeing how long that they can stay on the door when somebody else is slamming it over and over again. Why do that? Daring a classmate to poke them in the hand with a fork. Crazy stuff like that. Not that I ever did it. But all that. Okay, that's nothing in comparison to this guy named Larry Walters did some 40 years ago. I don't know if anybody in the audience would remember this story. Lawn Chair Larry. Hey, look it up, folks. Look it up. Google it. Lawn Chair Larry. I mean, this guy, man, oh man, he takes the cake. All right. This guy went and bought himself 45 weather balloons from an Army Navy surplus store, the big ones, rigged them to his lawn chair with some sort of a parachute type harness, tied everything down to his Jeep like as an anchor, and then proceeded to fill up each of the balloons with helium. All right. He puts on a parachute, straps himself to the chairs, and I think he's got sandwiches, he's got a beer, a couple of beers or whatever, and a pellet gun. All right. This is what he was thinking. I mean, he was going to ask his friends to cut the rope that held the rig to the Jeep, right? And then he figured he would just float up to, I don't know, 50, 100 feet, maybe 200 at the most, go around his neighborhood for a little while, and then just lazily start shooting the balloons one at a time with a pellet gun. And he'd come down softly after a few minutes. After a few minutes, no fuss, no muss. Well, did that ever backfire on this guy? Little did Larry know how much lift those 40 something balloons would have with all that helium in them. Okay. As soon as his friends cut the rope, there was no quiet floating. This crazy contraption of his shot up like a rocket. Okay. He ended up, before he knew it, he leveled off at like something like 16,000 feet in the air. Okay. And stayed there for more than 14 hours. The guy was definitely a nutcase. I mean, loony as a goonie. Talk about not being in your right mind. Oh yeah, he definitely wins the prize here. For somebody who is not in their right mind. So my definition would be anybody who would do something like all of the above. These things that go against sound reasoning, against common sense, against public safety, your own safety, concern for others, concern for your sanity, concern for your well-being, and just deliberately, or else not deliberately, don't even think the consequences through. I would say anything that comes in any of these categories. You don't have to go as extreme as Lawn Chair Larry. Please do not try this at home. Right? Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything that extreme. But anything that would violate sound reasoning and logic, yeah, that's definitely fits the bill for being not in your right mind.
So, comparing lawn chair Larry to someone in their right, okay?
Right,
So,
right,
someone
right.
in
Yeah,
the right state of mind would have, you know, considered all variables, maybe took
yeah.
it into account the fact that they were going to launch that far in space rather than this, you know, slow picnic in the sky that they were anticipating. I mean, someone in their
Yeah.
right state of mind would have approached situations with love in general. They're compassionate, they're caring, and you've
Mhm.
said a couple of those in earlier in our conversation. But I think it's just important to highlight what the right state of mind is. So, what, in your opinion, Dr.
Yes.
Joe, is the right state of mind?
That's an excellent question. Big contrast from
The
big
lawn chair
contrast from Lawn
Larry,
Chair Larry, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. So for me, okay, when I'm focused on the task at hand, all right, I'm focused on that task. I'm mindful of my surroundings, okay, and I'm at peace both with myself and with my fellow man. Okay. Um, if I'm focused, all right, let's take each one of those. If I'm focused, I'm not going to allow distractions from keeping me from doing what I need to do today. If I'm mindful, well, then I'm not going to get tripped up when obstacles come into my path because hopefully I will have considered them and anticipated them. And if I'm at peace, well, then even when circumstances don't turn out the way I intended, or if I run into numerous distractions, okay, I will not allow myself to be influenced or defined by or defeated by any of those circumstances. I mean, that's how I see it. Tiffany, what about you?
Oh, I would definitely agree with you, Dr. Joe. And also, I think that right mind involves having the right energy. And we've touched on it.
Yes,
We've said, love, compassion, understanding, being just going out of your way to do something nice, to just
yes,
really have that and I've said compassion several times, but just to really consider how other people's feelings are involved in a situation before you make a decision could be really critical to how things turn out. Because I know if you
yes,
already
ma'am.
go into a tense situation and you're full of rage yourself, it's going to escalate. It's probably not going to end well. But if you go into that same
That's right.
situation calm, and you have your mind together, which is being in that right state of mind, it's gonna
Right.
turn out better because you came into it with the right energy. So I think how you approach these situations, the energy that you bring to a situation is going to significantly impact whatever outcome and whatever situation that you're in. What do you think about that, Dr. Joe?
Absolutely. Tiffany, I could not agree with you more. Okay. What you said about escalating the situation, right? The other person gets angry, and that's the wrong kind of energy. Then you shoot back with that same kind of energy, with this, you meet their anger with your anger. Then it just continues to escalate. The best thing to do is to try to de-escalate the situation as much as you can, and pour water on it instead of gasoline. Tension that leads to anger. Well, that's really really negative. Okay, it's destructive as well. You know, I don't get anything done if I'm that way. Okay, anger has a way of blinding you to what's in front of you and what's all around you at the same time. All right. Anger triggers that fight, flight, or freeze reaction, right? That affects your ability to hear what's being said accurately at the time. And when you don't deal with it and let it fester, well, you're going to wind up either climbing up or blowing up. And neither one of those is good for your health nor for your relationship, right? Clamming up, well, you only keep allowing it to build and build and build, and sooner or later it will blow up even worse. Allowing it to blow up, well, then that does no good to you. As has been said, a bitterness is a poison, right? Bitterness and anger does more harm to the vessel in which it's stored than upon the vessel on which it's poured. My wife says that all the time. I love it. But recent studies by the American Journal of Medicine have shown that unresolved anger causes an increased risk of heart attack, a weakened immune system, an increased level of anxiety, and all other kinds of negative effects. All right. So, how much better is it, though, to deal with that anger up front, right? And channel it into something positive, right? Channeling anger into zeal instead of pouring it upon the other person. And by contrast, pour out that love and compassion and so forth, understanding that you're talking about, Tiffany. Absolutely. There are positive effects of having this mindset that you referred to. Okay, researchers at the State University of New York, for example, have found that it reduces stress and increases tolerance for pain of all things. So, yeah, we absolutely need to have that right energy that you're talking about. You, lady, you hit the nail on the head.
And I think one thing to highlight here is that if you don't immediately have that right energy, and let's say you are in a
Mhm.
stressful situation, just
Yeah,
stop and breathe. Just take a nice deep
right.
breath through your nose and out through your lips, and do it several times until
That's
you're in
right.
a state that it feels right to where you can make conscious, good decisions. Because if you're getting really anxious, you're not going to make a clear decision. But
Exactly.
it also comes into play with right place at the right time, because timing's everything, right? So if you take a
You
nice
got
deep
that
breath,
right.
it might align you better to be in the right place at the right time. What do you think about that, Dr. Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. As realtors always like to say, the three factors in buying a house are location, 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 right?
And
Location, right? Say what?
and timing.
And timing. That's right.
Location,
Location and timing. Right. Yeah, yeah,
location.
yeah. Exactly. So, about um, I think that if I'm focused on the positive, all right, dwelling on ways that I can be helpful to others, that's where the compassion goes in here, right? Committed to living out what I know in my heart and my head is right, then yeah, it's much more likely that I'm going to be at the right place at the right time. What I know to do right in my head. I've let's see, I've thought about it, right? I have a mental, psychological, intelligent assent to it in my head. Then I've internalized it in my heart so that it permeates my desire. It results in compassion. So it's gone from my head to my heart. and then I live it out with my hands, right? Goes from your head to your heart to your hands. And I think that that's the key, remembering that progression: head, heart, hands. And I think it'll help you to look for ways that you can put yourself in the right place at the right time and avoid saying or doing anything when you're not. You can always refrain from acting. You can always bite your tongue, purse your lips, say, I'm not going to say anything right this minute because if I'm mad and I spout off, I'm going to say something that I'm going to regret. That deep breath that you're talking about. So when you've done that, yeah, you'll be at the right place at the right time, and you will have learned to allow the truth of what the right thing to do, to go from your head to your heart to your hands.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. And I have to
Yes,
ask, are you right or left-handed, Dr. Joe?
ma'am. I am left-handed. I'm 100%. Most definitely, completely left-handed. I do a lot of things with my right hands. I play the guitar right-handed. I eat left-handed. I bat right-handed. But I am most definitely left-handed. There's a lot of other famous southpaws. I'm in good company. People like Angelina Jolie, Morgan Freeman, Keanu Reeves, Brad Pitt, Robert De Niro, Bruce Willis. Let's see, not Wolfman. The guy with the claws. Um, Hugh Jackman played him. I can't. Wolverine. I couldn't think of a name. Wolverine. Hugh Jackman. President Obama. President Bush. Bush the first. George H.W. So, a lot of left-handed people that are out there. We're not quite so common. But yeah, I am most definitely left-handed.
Well, although I'm pretty sure I was born right-handed. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure
was
if you
going to
can
ask you. Are you? You
not
seem to
sure if
be
you
ambidextrous.
can but I
Yeah.
am a little ambidextrous because
Okay.
I did break my left hand when I was young. And so
Yeah.
I also, around the same time, had a fellow kindergarten student who was able to write with both hands. And I thought
Oh,
it was so cool. And so
that is
even though I was damaged at the time, over time, I continued to do different things with my left hand and teach it how to write just in case anything happened to good old righty over here. But that it got me thinking later in life, does being right-handed or left-handed impact the way that you think? And then I realized there's a
mm,
right and a left brain. And
yes.
so looking at that, and the theory is that there are either left-brained people or right-brained people, meaning that one side of their brain is more dominant than the other. And so left-handed people, or left-brained, excuse me, brained people are usually more analytical, more methodical. They're more critical thinking, where the series says if you're right brain, then you're more creative, artsy, which that definitely fits my personality. So I would guess that
Yes,
I'm
it does.
probably right-handed. Some other characteristics of the left brain is logical, focused on facts, realism, planned and orderly, math and science. Where on the right side, they're emotional, focused on art, imaginative, occasionally absent-minded, likes fiction and stories. And I mean, I can definitely relate to this in some different ways to be more right-minded. If you want to be on more the creative and artsy side, and you're usually brain, some things that you could do is be more socially active, visit with family, go to
Right.
church, go on vacation, go outdoors. Visual arts,
Yes.
performing arts. But Dr. Joe, balance is such a necessity. So being
Agree.
that you're left-handed, and just knowing you, I would already guess that you're a little more strong on the left brain. But what are your thoughts on this? And do you have any
Sure.
ways to we could balance between the two? That you could give some advice or tips to?
Absolutely, Tiffany. You know, there's absolutely a way to find a balance between the two. Not only is that balance possible, but in many cases, I think it's necessary. It's required. I'll explain what I mean. As much as I believe that we do have, as you do, we have a tendency towards either right brain dominance or left brain dominance. Okay. I still think that in some ways, the dichotomy between the two that some would have us to believe is a very greatly pronounced and absolute, a rigid line between the two. I think the line is a little bit blurred. The dichotomy is a little bit exaggerated. Okay. Yeah. It is true. Yes, The right side does tend to be more creative, flamboyant, expressive, artistic, right? While the left side tends to be more methodical, objective, and structured, just as you said. Okay. But you know what, Tiffany? The longer I live and the more experience that I get, and that's getting to be a lot, the more that I've learned, you need both your reasoning and your imagination, both the order and the chaos, if you will. And I believe true wisdom lies in recognizing the extent to which both of those halves of the brain can be made to work together. All right. You need the logic on the left to inform and direct the passion on the right, right? The expression on the right to clarify the language on the left, and the creativity on the right to influence the science on the left. So you need both. Um, I also agree with what you said about stimulating both halves of the brain, right? Um, appeal to what interests that each one has. Engage both of them in activities that will further develop their strengths where you have weaknesses. Yeah. So I repeat it one last time. Both halves of the brain are needed. And you know what? One of the keys to success in both learning and in this right thinking that we're trying to accomplish here, right? At least in my view, anyway, is to recognize the extent to which the two sides of the brain need to work together. So, yeah, I could not agree with you more, Tiffany. Engage in those activities that if you tend to be gravitating towards one extreme, engage in activities that will stimulate the other as well and bring them both together. See how they can work together because both halves need each other. They're both up there in your head. Just because one is dominant, just because you are more leaning towards one direction than the other, doesn't mean that you can't appeal to the other side, as it were, and have a fuller, richer experience in life. At least that's the way I see it, Tiffany. How about you?
I think that you just hit the nail on the head, Dr. Joe. I'm so glad that we chose this topic today. And I think it has been a very powerful discussion because it never rains in Las Vegas and I can hear thunderstorms right now. So it is definitely a powerful discussion that we're having today.
Wow,
Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that
absolutely.
everyone out there got something valuable out of this conversations. And my last piece of advice is remember, two wrongs don't make a right.
Exactly. And two rights make an airplane. No. Indeed.
All right, everyone. Well, we do have our Meet to Order webinar coming up at the end of the month on July 28th. So be sure to join us for that. You can register at iotmktg.com. Any final thoughts, Dr. Joe, as we wrap things up?
Sure thing. You do not want to miss these events. Tiffany has a great deal of interest in each one of these, indomitable skill and talent and energy that she pours into it. So, folks, if you don't already have enough commitment, you need to get on the web and you need to look at these events that IoT Marketing puts on. They don't give you any money for saying that. Yeah, I mean that from my heart, seriously, because these are wonderful events, and you will certainly get something out of it that will help you to have a better day or help you to better understand things that are going on. And it will definitely be of some sort of benefit to you. So, whatever you do, look for it and get something out of it. And at the same time, hey, continue to get the most out of life and do your very best, and hopefully get both halves of of that brain working together.
Thank you, Dr. Joe.
Thank
I
you,
very
Tiffany.
much appreciate what you said, and I wish you safe travels on all your upcoming journeys. Everyone,
Thank
have
you
a
so
wonderful
much.
day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.